I actually took pictures of my ashwagandha bottle this morning. Because I was like, it's like one of those things where like I know it's supposed to be good, but I also know there's a lot of controversy in terms of the research on it.
Yeah.
And it's like some people are like, oh my gosh, it's just so great. And then some people are like, that's a crock of
hooey
shit. And they're like, that doesn't work. And I'm like, well, okay, interesting. But for whatever reason, I had never heard of ashwagandha, honestly, till like, I don't know, a year ago. And I know it's been around for a while. But for whatever reason, we have had so many athletes be like, do you know what ashwagandha is? Should I be taking it?
Yeah.
And I'm like, frick, I don't know. I was like, I don't even know really like what it is or what it does. So anyways, I've looked into it a little bit more, and everything that I've found, I mean, I don't think it's a bad thing to take. Obviously on the bottle, they're going to tell you if you're taking other medications or have medical issues that you should consult your doctor first before taking it. But I mean, as far as like what's in it, like, I mean, it's
pretty safe.
It's a root.
It's a root
from a plant.
Yep.
So, but yeah, it's been interesting because ashwagandha is basically supposed to help manage stress and cortisol levels, which certain types of ashwagandha, right, will handle cortisol levels better than others.
Correct.
So you have to be mindful of that. And then with that, it'll also help you sleep better, in theory, with the stress management and sleeping better, help you perform better in sports, everything like that. And it's been, I mean, we're very baseball heavy, so the types of athletes that come in here and ask about it, I mean, it's biased towards baseball just because we see a lot of baseball kids. But I would also say baseball is one of those sports where kids are the mental load and mental stress and anxiety is so much higher because baseball, although definitely a physical sport, is, I mean, extremely, extremely mental. And I mean, you have all the buzzwords, the yips, the yaks, I don't know, all the things that the baseball guys are like, oh man, like, I'm in a slump or I'm in this, and it's all in my head and I got to do this thing. And so anyways, ashwagandha has been a insanely hot topic, I feel like, recently. And then for me personally, obviously I'm a human, so I deal with stress and anxiety of my own, and I take some medication for it prescribed by a doctor. I do all sorts of other things like try to exercise, get good sleep, all that stuff, but it's still something that I wanted to manage a little bit better. And so, Brett, I talked to you about it, and then I've been taking it now for probably close to a month now. And personally, I feel like it's helped me. I feel like it's helped kind of calm my brain down a bit, mellowed me out a little. I don't feel quite as anxious or jumpy. But anyways, all that being said, ashwagandha for athletes, is it helpful? Is it healthy? Should it be something they should consider, or should they be doing so well on all the other things in being healthy that they shouldn't need it?
Well, that's a loaded question.
They always are.
I know. I love loaded questions. So, ashwagandha is a root powder that essentially can be used as a daily adaptogen. And that what that means is it helps your cell levels adapt daily to different peaks and valleys. So we have all these different hormone levels in the body, and cortisol is one that you mentioned. Cortisol is the stress hormone. Now, do we need stress hormones? Yeah, absolutely. That's what helps with the sympathetic nervous system in that fight, flight, or freeze. And at times, especially in sports, you have to be able to fight. And sometimes you have to be able to flight faster. And the faster you flight, the faster you score. So we need to have those levels, but when they get too out of whack or too elevated, it can cause bad responses with other hormones. For example, especially with our male athletes, when those cortisol levels get really, really high, cortisol impedes the body's use of testosterone. So if you're trying to build muscle, gain weight, get faster, perform better, the high levels of cortisol are going to impede your ability to do that. And you can take all of the extra supplements and everything else that you want to boost that testosterone, but if the cortisol levels are high, it's never going to let you use that bioavailable testosterone. At the same time, there are instances where you can drop that cortisol way too low, and that can become dangerous on your systems, particularly the hypothalamus and pituitary gland, which help regulate all sorts of other body systems. So there's a time and place for it, and it is a very safe, effective daily adaptogen that helps your body manage cortisol by essentially binding to it and kicking it out. But you should also be mindful of what those levels are, and very simple blood tests can tell us what those hormone levels are, to make sure that is the right thing to do. And fortunately, we're now at a place where if you want to go get those blood levels tested, you can just simply order them through a variety of different labs, go get your blood drawn, and it will give you those levels back. So I just sent somebody a couple weeks ago to go get blood drawn to make sure that the issues that we're still fighting are, it's not because one of the hormones is way too out of whack. And as I expected, and now we have confirmation, when the blood levels came back, the cortisol is still, it's within normal range, but it's still really high in that normal range. And testosterone levels were within normal range, but at the low end of normal range. So that then tells me, yeah, we have room to increase the amount of testosterone or cortisol, ashwagandha being taken, or add in another supplement that helps with that, such as like Tongkat Ali, or something that everybody's seeing all over TikTok right now is Shilajit, and that helps balance the hormonal regulation within the pituitary gland as well. So it just helps keep everything in a more steady state throughout your whole system. With ashwagandha, the one thing that you need to make sure that it has, if you want it to work really well on cortisol, is KSM 66, and it'll say right there on the back of the bottle whether it has that, because that's the true root powder rather than just the plant leaf powder.
Yeah. So I want to ask some not necessarily controversial questions, but curious questions that may be asked by athletes. So let's say my cortisol levels, or like my stress levels and the stress hormone and everything, is like pretty regular, but I want to push myself harder or put more stressors on my body to try to work harder in my sport, in the weight room, whatever. Could you take ashwagandha to help build your capacity to manage cortisol?
I think so. There are a lot of other things you can do to help manage cortisol that are not simply taking the ashwagandha. And that is, like we talked about with, if it's an active thing that you're doing, you need to have an active recovery approach. And so things like breathing exercises and managing the overall load, certain types of foods that can help bring those cortisol levels down or manage them. The ashwagandha is more of a passive therapy to help eat that stuff up, whereas you need to do other more active things to also help combat that so that you can increase your capacity for performance output.
Should ashwagandha or really any of these supplements that are taken to lower cortisol or manage cortisol levels, is it unhealthy to take those long term, or should the goal be, if you have to get on one or if you feel the need to take one, that you should be doing other things to eventually get off of it?
You know, I think that when you're talking about the chemistry of medications and supplements, it completely depends on what it is and what the long-term goal is. I have yet to see any studies negative long-term usage of ashwagandha, but I'm sure that there is a case where that would be the thing. So I think routine monitoring, routine revisiting of your goals is important to make sure that what you're doing is still matching what the outcome you're trying to get to. Mm-hmm. And whether that's routine blood work that you get on an annual physical, which you should be doing anyway, fine. If it's just changing your goals throughout the year and maybe you need that higher stress hormone for certain training blocks within your overall macro cycle of periodization for that year training, maybe you need to have the levels higher at times, and so you would come back off of that ashwagandha at various times. So I think that if you really want to science your body and use the cellular processes and hormonal processes of your body to do what they're designed to do, you need to be asking that question routinely, because there's probably a time and place when you want to spike those levels up a little bit.
Yeah. Cool.
Ashwagandha. That was a nice curveball. Thank you. I like that one. The last question. That's a good one.
Just try to think of all the questions that are